Good afternoon and welcome to the second session for the Stakeholder Integration Virtual Conference. Today we're going to have Michelle Izaguirre, Shelley Sievers, and Daphne Johnson from the Alamo Consortium talking about working with businesses for apprenticeships. I am Olga Escamilla, one of your hosts and moderators, and we also have Deborah Hargrove as a host and moderator for the session. So I'm going to start by going over a few of the housekeeping rules with you this afternoon. We'd like to remind you about our webinar best practices. Our first one is mute your phones at all times, type your questions in the chat pod, or raise your virtual hand. And remember to select everyone when you post your comments or questions in the chat pod, and I'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. In terms of receiving your PD certificate for attending, that can be downloaded and printed from your PD portal account, your AEL PD portal account, and you can find that in your transcripts. And that'll take a couple of days because we do verify through the system attendance. And another reminder that if you have individuals sitting with you, please let us know so that we can give those individuals that are sitting with you attendance credit. We have some information here about expanding the view of your webinar. So if you're watching the webinar and the screen is kind of small, you can adjust it with the controls on the right-hand side of your screen, of your WebEx screen. So if you will use the diagonal arrows, that will expand your screen to full screen, and you might be able to see that PowerPoint a little bit better if you're having some trouble. So in regards to responding to everyone in the chat pod, and we always say that, if you'll look at your chat pod and it says chat, your chat icon at the top right-hand corner should be blue. If you look to the bottom of your chat pod where it says send to, you need to manually change that to everyone. So if you'll change that to everyone and type your questions there and then hit send, we would greatly appreciate it. And we do encourage your questions for these sessions because this is how we learn and this is why we're sharing. So we encourage that. So our presenters today, we have Michelle Izaguirre, and Michelle is an educational specialist with Education Service Center Region 20 in San Antonio, and she's been there since 2006, working with adults in the Adult Education and Literacy Department. She currently works with the Grant Management Team for Adult Education and Literacy Alamo Consortium, which provides education and career training services to adult learners in Bexar County and the 12 surrounding counties. She serves as a board member for TALY, which is the Texas Association for Literacy and Adult Education, and she utilizes her vast experience to assist adult education programs improve and expand their services under WIOA guidelines. We also have today Shelley Sievers, and Shelley is an adult educator with 20 years of experience. She's an American Red Cross trainer, a U.S. Air Force trainer, and most recently a member of ISC Region 20 team. She's a trained PD master trainer for MTA and HART standardized trainings, and she's in various Tech Intel trainings that we have encouraged you all to come to the PD portal and view. She has a master's degree in education and a master's certificate in distance learning. And our final presenter is Daphne Johnson. Daphne Johnson is an adult educator with 15 years of experience, and I think it's 20. But we have 15 here. She's an educational specialist with San Antonio Independent School District. She provides adult education training for her district, and she has an excellent working knowledge of TWC Teams data system. So welcome our presenters, and in case if you don't have any questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our presentation. And Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Olga. As Olga mentioned, I work for Education Service Center Region 20. We are the grant recipient in the Alamo area. We support and provide guidance to 8 service providers. Northeast ISD and San Antonio ISD are the 2 service providers that have developed apprenticeship program partnerships in our area. So our main goal today is to share information as to how we set up classes, who we collaborated with, and how often we communicated to make the apprenticeship program partnerships happen. So Olga already introduced us. So let me move forward. So the first thing that I want to talk about is our connection. We connected with TD Industries through our teacher externship project last summer. We invited Jesse Hernandez to be our guest speaker, who at the time was their assistant production manager. During his session, one of the teachers asked him if there was a need for an ESL class at his facility. His response was yes. With this being said, I took full advantage of it. I reached out to him to set up a face-to-face meeting right after our session ended, at which time I also reached out to Northeast ISD to attend the meeting. Since Northeast ISD is in the same area as TD Industries, it was a perfect fit. So the purpose of the meeting was to connect Northeast ISD and TD Industries and then pass the baton per se. At this meeting is when the planning stage was initiated. So I'm going to ask Shelley a question. Shelley, how often did you have to communicate prior to implementing the program?
With Jesse and his group, we met 2 different times face-to-face, and then, of course, those follow-up emails with different questions, different concerns, and we had quite a few phone calls as well.
Thank you, Shelley. And Shelley, would you mind giving us an overview of the program partnership Northeast ISD has with TD Industries?
Yeah, of course. So what we started with TD Industries is an ESL multi-level class. They meet twice a week for 2 hours between the hours of 5 and 7. The site foremen ensure that the students, or employees they call them, leave the work site by 3:30, because you have to understand this industry, TD Industries, they are plumbers, welders, HVAC folks, so they're on job sites throughout San Antonio. I'm not quite sure if they're finished just yet, but I know that they were working on the AT&T Center. They had some construction going on there. So anyway, the foreman makes sure that they leave their work site by 3:30 so they can get to the home office there on O'Connor Road in time to eat dinner and to start class. Speaking of dinner, it's a great place to work because they offer the students, the employees, dinner. They bring in catered food every evening that they have class or they have food trucks on site. So anyway, they hold class in large conference rooms. They do have Wi-Fi available as well as laptop computers and projectors available for the instructor to use. Now, we also were pleased to offer to the participants' family members, those who are 19 years or older, to join the ESL class. And I want to mention here that 3 of the employees have already completed their apprenticeships. Ricardo completed his plumbing apprenticeship. Moises is currently in his 2nd year of plumbing apprenticeship, and Daniel is currently in his 3rd year of sheet metal apprenticeship. So really good class.
Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, what qualifications do your students need to be in the program?
Okay, so we talked at great length with Jesse Hernandez about this issue. Who should be the students? Who should be invited to the class? And so he decided, and with our assistance, that the employees were going to be selected by managers and supervisors, because there are certain employees who they have their eyes on who are being considered for promotions. So they need to improve their English skills.
At any point, did you have to recruit for the program?
No, we didn't do any recruiting for this particular partnership. The employer did it for us, so it was pretty easy for our part.
Yes. And how do you think you keep the students engaged and attending the class?
Yeah, absolutely. It happens very naturally. We're pleased to say They have incentives. They're looking at promotion, which means pay increases. Like I mentioned, their dinner is provided to them at no cost. They've told us that they really enjoy the lessons because the lessons are relatable to the kind of work that they do every day, and plus they really like their instructor.
Thank you. So how do you connect your AEL class to their job instruction-wise, real life to their job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Our instructor, she contextualizes the lessons, like I said, to the industry, like plumbing, welding, pipe fitting, etc. That's not to say that she has a background in those work areas. It means that she gets materials from the company. They provide employee manuals to use in the classroom, like orientation, HR benefits, safety manuals, and things like that. And she also gets her hands on as many different vocabulary books as she can so that she can use the type of verbiage and language that they use on their work site.
Thank you, Shelley. And can you talk a little bit more about retention rates? What did they look like the first time around?
Yeah, for sure. This is a really well-attended class, and so the average daily attendance has been about 33%. We started with only, I think, I don't have it here in my notes, but I believe it was 12 total, and that was with a couple of spouses who joined the class. So a nice, close-knit group, and that's for the 33% of those family members stayed on, and then we have 46% of the employees that have a good daily average attendance.
Thank you for sharing, Shelley. So let's talk a little bit about your communication after implementation. How often do you communicate after implementation to keep the effort going?
Yeah, we feel like it's very important to keep those lines of communication open. So we proceed as needed. Certainly, we communicate by phone calls and by site visits, but most commonly we communicate through email.
And you touched a little bit on this. How will you continue this effort?
Oh, absolutely. Through communication. It's really important that we keep close tabs. I'll mention here that Jessie has moved on to another position, and so I'm now working with a lady. Her name is Mariana. She's super friendly. She is very excited about our adult education efforts and what we can offer to their company. And so she's working now on recruiting. And I saw her last week at NEISD Career Expo. TD Industries had a booth set up, and so I had heard rumors of that, so I made sure that I hunted her down and said hello to her. She was kind enough to introduce me to some of her colleagues, and we chatted for a little bit, and that was a good opportunity to bring up, hey, what about starting a high school equivalency class? And of course, she's really excited about that. We emailed back and forth the next day, and now we have plans to get together for a face-to-face to start that class within the coming weeks.
Thank you, Shelley. Can you tell us a little bit about Emmanuel?
Yeah, I mean, just look at his picture. He's a super great guy. He's just so friendly. He really, really enjoys the classes, and it's his wife. One of the two spouses that has been attending is his wife, and he says he likes being in class with her because she helps him. They're just a really neat couple, and it's great that she doesn't get to see him all day because he's at work, and she shared with us that it's a neat idea that she can join him and the others for dinner, and then they have class together. So she's not sitting at home on the sofa waiting for him to come home. So they're enjoying something together, and they're actually learning together. On a related note, you'll see there on the screen, I want to share with you another spouse. I'll call her Elle just to protect her identity, but she is an employee's wife. She joined the class in September, and she attended very faithfully. Well, in March, she joined our IET Pharmacy Tech career training class. She has not told her husband what she's up to because she wants it to be a surprise when she shows him the completion certificate. And of course, you're probably thinking what I asked her out loud is, where does he think you are on those 2 nights of the week? And she said that she told him that her class got moved to another location so that she was still learning, but it just wouldn't be at his site anymore. So I love that story.
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing. So before we move on to the next apprenticeship program partnership, does anyone have any questions for Shelley?
We've got a couple of questions that have come in privately, and the first one is, have you had an opportunity to recruit for classes that you've set up? And if yes, what are some ways that you recruit?
Yeah, okay, so for this particular apprenticeship program, we don't do the recruiting ourselves. The HR department there at TD Industries has taken that on themselves because they want to hand select particular students or employees. And so, but learning lessons I would consider for this effort, how we can go forward with recruiting is that we're now working very closely or more closer than ever with Workforce Solutions. They're a great support network for us. They do offer hiring events, and they have invited us to attend those events. So that's a great recruiting effort because we're talking more and more to other workplace, what we call stakeholders, of course. We're talking to more of them about hiring individuals who might not have a high school diploma, or they might not have quite the English skills needed for the type of work. And so we're making those connections by offering our services to come in, that we can, together, this partnership, we can offer these preparation classes to our community members who might not otherwise be hireable because of maybe not completing their diploma or having those English skills. So it's a great effort. I appreciate that question very much. It is a very important aspect of this program is, of course, those recruiting efforts.
Right. And we have another private question. How will you keep these classes going in the future? What are your plans?
Gosh, we're dreaming and planning for bigger and better. We're all very excited about it. The fever is catching in the entire consortium, right, Michelle?
Yes, I'll have to chime in. When Northeast and TD Industries connected, we started off with an ESL class, and now we're going to have an ESL class and an HSC class. So it already has started to expand in those aspects. But like Shelley mentioned earlier, we are now becoming known by employers, and thanks to WSA's contractors, they have really helped us create and develop more relationships with the employers.
Any other questions, y'all? Type it in the chat pod.
I do have a question for Shelley. This is Michelle.
Yeah.
So Shelley, can you tell me, does it take a special instructor to head this class?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about this yesterday for those of you who might have joined us yesterday for Takumi and Triple TX. But it's well worth reiterating here today, and that is that while we have very professional, highly educated, experienced instructors here in our own AEL program, it does take a very specialized instructor to take on the workplace literacy, the HSE, and the ESL classes because of that contextualized lessons piece. I've used this analogy quite a few times, so if you've heard it, here it goes again. Those of us that have taught math for many years, quite often when we're teaching fractions, we use
you guessed it, pepperoni pizza or apple pie. And so instead of having that sort of scenario in the workplace, you would want to have something that's more contextualized to their work. And so you might use something that one of the sorters might use. And so you could use that as an example for the fractions, the math or fractions. And so it is very important to choose your instructors very carefully. Make sure that they go through the Train PD instruction out there on the PD portal that is contextualized lesson planning. It's very good. It is an extensive program. I took it myself, and I highly recommend it. So your teacher needs to be trained, needs to be supported by you and your staff, maybe getting supplemental information, supplemental books or resources to make sure that they are ready for those contextualized lessons.
Questions? Michelle, go ahead.
Thank you, Deb. So we're going to move on with plumbers and pipe fitters and our connection to them. So this time last year, Region 20 had Chapter 133 funds. So we developed a good working relationship with the training director, Frank Southers. And Frank expressed a need for a class to assist his apprentices upgrade their skills. And so we went and met with him face to face. I actually asked San Antonio ISD to join us because they are in his area, so it was a perfect fit. At the meeting, at that point is when the planning started. So I'm going to ask Daphne a couple of questions pertaining to the program partnership with plumbers and pipe fitters. So Daphne, how often did you have to communicate prior to implementing the program?
Well, we met face-to-face a couple of times again with Mr. Frank Southers, my contact over at the apprentice work site. And we also spoke on the telephone several times and through emails. And sometimes I even was able to drop in a couple of times to speak with him, just a drop in, because there were some questions I had about when we were doing the testing, and we kept missing each other because Mr. Southers is a very busy guy. He's in and out the office quite often. So he said, well, sometimes if you're in the neighborhood, just stop by. It was on my way into work, so at 7:30 in the morning, I was able to stop by and communicate with him face-to-face as well. And we continued communicating through emails at least once a week prior to the first day of our class.
Thank you. And Daphne, would you mind sharing, giving us an overview of the program partnership with the plumbers and pipe fitters?
Sure. The program usually was, we first did the first session back in August of 2017, and it was a 5-week session, and it's a very fast-paced session because we're doing nothing, bringing up the students' work math skills. And also, if the students scored low in their language, he encouraged them to continue the class in the class as well. All our students have a high school diploma or GED in the program. We also met students that actually had some college and had been in the military as well. The class met twice a week. Actually, we met twice a week, 4:30 to 7:30, and our instructor was there 30 minutes early to have any questions or meet with the contact person in the morning. The training director actually made the program mandatory for the apprentice. And the class was held in a large conference room. The Wi-Fi was available. We actually had the first session 2 assistants in the classroom. If the instructor needed any handouts, they would make the copies for him. And also if he needed to have any questions or keep any of the guys in line, because these guys were coming right off from work. We started the class, we first started off at 5 o'clock, so in the first week of class, but then the students say, hey, 5 to 8 is kind of long, so can we work with the instructor and see if we could change the class from 4:30 to 7:30? And so that's when we went from 4:30 to 7:30. Because the instructor agreed that the guys was getting there about 3:30, 3:45, and we started class at 4:30.
Thank you. So for this program, what do the students need?
The apprentice students actually have to be accepted through the Plumbers Pipe Fitters Apprenticeship Program. The union has their own criteria apprentices need to meet these criteria. I tried to contact Mr. Southers, sending that. He was supposed to have been sending me actually the criteria, what those employers need. I do, like I said in the past, when they actually need a high school diploma or a GED to actually be in the program. And so they, of course, they have to do their drug tests and all that in order to be in the Plumbers Pipe Fitter program.
So did you have to do any recruitment for the program?
We didn't have to do any of the recruitment. Actually, like Michelle mentioned earlier, they came to us and asked us, hey, we need help in upgrading our employee skills. And so they did all the recruitment. Our first recruitment, we had actually 38 students that we assessed with the TABE assessment. Out of that 38, 23 was into the program because all the other ones maxed out at ASE High in the program.
And so how do you keep the students engaged and attending?
With their desires to be plumber pipe fitters, that keeps them engaged and attending class. And also the training director is constantly in contact with the instructor and the student to monitor the student's progress. They always had someone popping their head in the class when I would go and visit. What I tried to do for the first couple of weeks, I was present in the classroom. So if they had any questions about the partnership and with SAISD and the plumbers, then I was able to be in there. I actually would sit in the class for the first hour, the first couple of weeks, if the students had any questions for me on the partnership side. And so with as I mentioned before, we actually had an assistant, 2 assistants in the first session of our program that was always it stayed the entire class because the director, which is Frank Southers, he paid them to be there because that was, one of them was the actual instructor where those students were going to be going after they get those upgrades in their math skills.
Michelle, excuse me, we have a couple of questions if I can interject.
Oh, go for it.
Let me see. Do you use special textbooks in these classes, Daphne?
Yes, actually, Mr. Southers gave me a math skills related book that was directed only for plumbers and pipe fitters. It was a CD that he gave to my instructor. We downloaded it. We went through all the different forms that told you what type of questions that they may be needing, the type of math skills that they need. And if everything was based on the basic math skills upgrade. They also gave us little rulers that the instructor may use in the classroom that the plumbers, pipe fitters may need on their job sites. We had access to the room where all those equipment was set if the instructor chose to go into the other room where all this other equipment was. But he gave my instructor about 5 different little resources that the plumbers and pipe fitters, like what type of equipment they need, the poles, the pipes, and all the sizes, so he can make sure he hit on the different types of math questions, the review of the math questions that they would need for that class.
Okay, great. And we had one other question, 2 others actually. One is generic, I believe, and I'll ask it in a moment. How do you communicate our AEL requirements, like hours and progress testing, to the stakeholders? How do y'all do that?
When I first met with them, we sat down and told them that it was required that we needed his students in our classroom for at least 40 hours. That's why the first time we had it for 5 weeks, and it kind of cut it close. The first, actually, I think it's 3 days a week, Michelle. We met. Okay. Yes, we meet Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I apologize for that. And it was so we did 9 times 5 was 45, and it cut it close because we know life happens with some of our students, and of course these guys coming from work. So we told them that they were required to be with us at least 45 hours for the class, and so before we can do an assessment with them at the end. Lesson learned from that, the second session that we had, we actually did a 6-week, so that gave us extra about 54 hours, extra hours, so we wouldn't cut it too close because we had one student had to drop out because he had a death in the family, and so he had to leave he left the whole entire apprenticeship program because we thought he was going to come back. So we sat with them, and at the beginning, Michelle and them made it clear that it was important that we had to meet our AEL requirements, where the students had to be in our program for at least 40 hours. And some of them actually only needed the 30 hours because some of them came in at ASE low. But for the most part, all the students were, the mid-range of the students was at intermediate high on the level 4.
So you have them come to your site to do the baseline testing? No,
ma'am. We go on site. The class was held on site as well. And we had a very large room, and we had support. They had someone, even though the building was closed, we had access to the back of the building where the students and the assistant, that's why it was someone always on site. The training director himself, Mr. Southers, wasn't on site, but he made sure that the assistant and the instructor that was going to get these students at the end of our session was on site and popped their head in. So we had access to his building. We brought, when we first tested, we had the 38. I had 3 or 4 testers with me. We progressed, and then the next day they had the results.
Okay, great. I've got 2 more questions, but I'm going to leave those, Olga, for some more generic question period.
Okay, perfect. So, Daphne, how do you connect, or how does the teacher connect your AEL class to their job, instruction-wise?
Okay, well, the plumbers and pipe fitters apprentice main focus is math. And our instructor tailored his instruction to specific math skills that are essential to a master plumber pipe fitter. And those resources that the training director gave us was a great resource, and it connected to some of the same things with the skills that we have to learn, for our students have to learn in our regular AEL class. It was basic fractions and decimals, ratios and proportions and percent, systems of the measurements. That was one of them that was very, very important for the students. And we completed the MAP training course CD, as I mentioned before, that Mr. Southers gave to me with our initial meeting. And we also included interactive training exercises, digital video, and they review quizzes.
So looking at the retention rate, it states approximately 80%. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. The first group, we had 38 we tested, 23 was eligible for the class. We finished with 21 of those students in the classroom. Again, the average of them was at the NRS level 4. And out of those 20, I want to say 19 made a completion in their DOS, because we did test them in, I want to say this, all of them mastered out on the reading portion.
Oh, that's awesome.
The language and the math was where they lacked, and so we made sure we did the DOS it's either math or language, so they got one or the other, and of course they can get an MSG in any one of those. But for the most part, the majority of them was math related. Math was their DOS, and so we was very successful with that class and happy with the results of that class.
Oh, I went too far. Sorry about that. So how often will you meet after implementation to keep this effort going?
We have met, as soon as the session is over, I give Mr. Southers, my contact person, the results, and with the TABE assessment post-test results. And he was very, very pleased that all of them, the high percentage had improved in the class. And so we're in constantly contact with each other. And I was sharing with Michelle, he actually called me yesterday to say, hey, are you ready to get going for our third session? which will be starting on May 29th, and we'll be ending right at the end of our fiscal year, June 28th, because we're going to be doing it 3 days a week, and it's going to be five-week session, because he has to make sure that he's able to connect with his clients as far as getting the emails out to them to see who's going to be in the class for the next session. And another thing how they connect is there's always a person there, because some of these guys are actually, all of them are not working at that time. Some of them do get laid off. But my instructor told me that they have a person that knows all the plumbers' positions that's open in San Antonio, and he actually calls all of them to see if they have any openings for those guys that may be laid off for a couple of weeks. And my instructor told me within 1 week, it was 2 guys in the class, within 1 week, both of them was employed by the, within that week, because he's constantly in contact with those plumbing companies to make sure that they have a job and that they're not out of work for too long. So I think it's very important, like Shirley said in her program, that you have to have a strong instructor. And the instructor has to be in constantly contact with me as well as with the students, because you have to build that relationship. He actually had students come back from the first session and was encouraging the students and say, hey, this guy is good, and you know, you're going to learn a lot from him. And they actually told the training director as well that they were very pleased with the results of our instructor. And the training director, I want to say he's actually over the union, Mr. Southers, he actually came to me after the end of our second session and said, hey, we want to put everyone in there. And I said, well, because some of them max out at the HSE high level, some of them do have college hours already, and they max 12.9, 23, 24 out of 25. I told them they would not be able to attend because their next step would be to get HSE or be, get a GED or whatever. But he was saying because his higher ups said that we've had so much success in the program that they were hoping that everyone that we test still can do some upgrading in that class. And again, the instructor, soon as he's very concerned about the students, they talk after class. Sometimes he say he can't get out the door because they come and ask him, hey, can you give me some homework? Are there any other sites that we can actually go online to look for and practice? And they were just awesome. They even asked me, hey, can you give me? So we had an instructional coach. She gave me some websites.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yes, she gave me websites to give to my instructor for the students to go on and look on. They were very, very excited and happy with the instructor that we had in place.
So let me ask you a question, Daphne. Are there any of these apprentices that may not be eligible? Because at the beginning you mentioned you had a total of, I think, 38.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that that's the difference, right?
The difference is when we test the group, we base them on 9th grade level and below. Anyone that scored 9th grade level and below, then they were the ones that the Frank Southers want in the program, because if they went 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, then they didn't have to be in the program. So they was at the ASE low level, and he wanted to make sure that anyone between the 9th grade and below level, because I shared with him that they're coming in at an ABE intermediate high. I kind of in which with AEL, without AEL qualifications, and he said okay, and because he had put one student in the class that had 12.9s, but in his language he had an 8.9, and he made this guy go to class. And I said, hey, this guy's, right at the cutting edge, and he may not need this class because his math skills were so high. And, of course, this was his first time testing. This guy told me in about 15, 20 years. And so after a couple of weeks, the guy didn't have to attend the class. But that's where we cut it off from 9th grade and below.
Perfect. Thank you for answering that. So I have a question for both Shelley and Daphne. Was there any reluctance with the student or the apprentices attending You kind of touched on a little bit, maybe they didn't think they needed to be in the class, or why am I in the class? Did you see any of that?
Yes.
We'll start with Daphne.
Yes, I did. The second session, we're getting ready to start our third session May 29th. We just finished one back in right after spring break, March 22nd was our second session ended. The first night I went to class, after I gave them the scores and Mr. Southers told who needed to be in the class, first guy, I said, any questions for me? Why am I here? I scored, I shouldn't be here. I have a high school diploma. I have a couple of years of college. I said, based on the assessment that we gave you on the previous, the night before, you scored low, and, so he said, well, I don't need this class. I shouldn't have this class. And so I tried to explain to him the scores, and our instructor, Mr. Sanchez, who's an awesome guy, he said, well, this is where you are, so that means you may not have to be here very long. Well, for whatever reason, the next night I went back to class, he was not there. Besides that, he was the only one that was reluctant about going to the class. Now, one thing they do have when they do the drug test, because it was during a time when there was a lot of sickness going around, one guy tested negative, and he had, for whatever reason, and it was some type of medicine or medication he was on, and they were trying to clear that up. But all the other students, they missed because of things that happened in their personal lives. But other than that, there was no reluctance because it was mandatory for them. And we gave them a break, of course, midway between 4:30 and 7:30.
Thank you. Shelley?
Yeah, I was listening carefully to Daphne talk about that one student who said he didn't feel like he needed to be there. We had one student, or still have, that is, one student who joined the multi-level ESL class there at TD Industries, that he actually came forward and said, hey, look, I have a high school diploma from, one of the local high schools. I've taken a couple of college courses there at Alamo Colleges, but I wasn't very successful. He said, my English is not very strong because we speak only Spanish at home. And he said, I think this class will help me. And we all really praised him for having such a great outlook. Whereas, English is a big part of his life. He grew up as a kid speaking both English and Spanish, but he knew that he was being looked at for promotion to a supervisor or foreman position, and so he was very much willing to put in the time in an ESL class to be successful in that job. No other students really made any sort of comments. Again, all of these employees were hand-selected by the management team, and so they knew that they were being looked at for promotion. And, of course, what does promotion mean? But a higher rate of pay. And so that, to me, is very motivating. So certainly to those employees, that is a great motivational factor.
Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, you mentioned a training on the portal. Can you tell us what that is again?
The training on the portal I mentioned earlier is the contextualized lesson planning. And forgive me, Olga and Glenda, I know she's not on, but they were instrumental in putting together this training. I found it on the PD portal. Just type in contextualized, I think was my key search. And you'll find, and Olga can help me out with this, exactly how long it is, but it is intensive. It is very good, really good videos that not only were motivational for me as we began our efforts for a workplace literacy program and the apprenticeship, but it also was very informative as to seeing it through the eyes of prospective students, those employees or those apprentices. And so again, if you'll just go out to the PD portal and type into the search field contextualized, it should pop up for you. Olga, do you have something there?
Well, this is Deb. Were you talking about the face-to-face training?
No.
Okay.
It's a It's an online training event.
I think there are three.
We
There are. It's a
Yeah, the linked
It's a
courses.
three-part. Yes, it's
Yeah.
the three-part link series.
linked courses. Uh-huh.
There you go. That's
And they're an hour apiece, yeah.
Uh-huh. And it's facilitated by Glenda. She has to grade your homework for you to get credit, and it's again, it's very, very good. I highly recommend it to those of you who are looking to implement your own stakeholder integration program, and certainly for those instructors that you hand choose.
And I'd like to add to that statement, we really would like for you to request those classes and go through them. I will say, though, that just be mindful of the end of the grant period, since things have to be manually graded. We'll probably turn those off or not accept anything after a particular period of time. I think it's either June 1st or June 15th. So if you want to get into those, please think about getting in those quickly.
Thank you for sharing, Shelley. I do have a question for Daphne, because I know that her instructor worked really hard to put together a course syllabus, and I just kind of want to know how that transpired and grew into this syllabus that he now uses, and he'll be using it this third time around as well.
Yes, yes. We met, the instructor, myself, and our instructional coach at that time. We met and went over the materials from the CD that was given to us, and also the other books. And we came up with the lessons of what he's teaching for week 1, week 2, and week 3. And what we did was we pulled those lessons from the math-related book that Mr. Suthers gave us from the Plumbers Pipe Fitters, and we put that into the syllabus. And we were actually able to use some of our materials from Top 50 Math Skills from Contemporary, the Keys to GED Access from Steck Vaughn, and the Score Boosters to go with the new, of course, with New Readers Press. And so we came, did that with him, and it was funny how everything was in sync what he was doing in all the books that Mr. Suthers had given him. It fell right down into the course and the review. And I say this guy is awesome. He came in every day, even before TWC said it was going to be required for us to have a syllabus. He had his own little lesson plan and his objectives every single day in the front of the desk, what he was going to go over with the students. And it was just awesome. It was just he had a flow going on. And so he knew exactly what he was going to be speaking on that day. And sometimes I would sit in the class, excuse me, and I was just mesmerized because Mr. Sanchez is very knowledgeable in math, and it was like bringing things back to me. I hadn't had a math class, and I can't remember when, and I was just in tune into the class going, oh, yeah, that's how that is. And you could see the students' eyes light up when he would, say, you want to relate this to everyday life. And they didn't realize, I didn't realize I would use that like that. Now that makes sense. So he made this into everyday life for these students, and how it was going to be correlated with them in their jobs, everyday job work. And it was just, I would enjoy going to the class just to listen to Mr. Sanchez do his lessons in the classroom.
Thank you, Daphne.
Mm-hmm.
Shelley, did you have anything to add?
I do not have anything to add to that. I guess other than, well, I can say that Ms. Rasa, our teacher, doesn't have a strict syllabus or curriculum guide like you speak of there, Daphne, for your class. I guess it's a little different with multi-level ESL. Certainly she does, she does use the Ventures book, and, she uses supplemental information, but with the Ventures, it's pretty straightforward. It's not going to be contextualized. And so we are working on having a more structured syllabus, and we're gathering ideas from Michelle and Wendy and others. Daphne, we're going to ask for her help as well.
We'd be happy to help you, Shelley. So, I'm sorry, was there another question, Deb?
We did have another question, and I'm not quite sure if we asked it. Somebody asked, how can I start a partnership with my local workforce solutions? So,
Well,
Michelle.
Well, that's so easy. Notice how I laugh. Well, you know, we've been very, very lucky. We have a really good Workforce Solutions Alamo team here. And so not only do we work with the board, but we also work very closely with their contractors. So from the youth side, we work very closely with ResCare, and then we work very closely with C2 Global. So we meet with those two contractors quarterly, just to kind of keep each other in touch with what's going on with AEL side and then what's going on with the WSA side. So really it starts at the top. You really need to get familiar and commit to meeting them, having a meeting with them. I know that they are very busy, but here they really do take time to meet with us because I know they value our relationship, and they know that integrating our services and working together, collaborating together is very important. That's like our highest priority right now. And I think we mentioned this earlier, and Shelley may have mentioned in one of her webinars, is thanks to our relationship with ResCare and C2 Global, they have really given us a lot of leads informing our employer partnerships. So we're really excited because that's one of our main goals this year and our coming year. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. I just want to say really thank you to Shelley and Daphne, because I'll tell you this much. It wasn't me that developed and nurtured this partnership. It was really their efforts. And I have to say that in order to be successful with such programs, you really do have to have a good team, and that you have to, and I do communicate with Shelley and Daphne pretty frequent, because I want to make sure that these two programs are successful and that we continue with them and continue to grow. And Shelley and Daphne are my go-to people when I have ideas and I want them to try something. And usually the partner is in their area, so it kind of works out for me. So I just want to say thank you to them, because if it wasn't for their efforts and their hard work, these two programs would not have been as successful as they have been.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle, Daphne, and Shelley. I just had one thought that I wanted to share, and Daphne made a comment about the apprenticeship and how there was a gentleman who provided individuals with connections to employers in case they lost their job, that they had something else lined up possibly. And I think that that's a great example of something that we need to, our adult education literacy needs to be doing in terms of with the career pathways and our career pathway navigators, is developing those relationships with employers to have those jobs lined up for when our students finish with the training, that we have employers that we refer them to that are ready to hire. So that was a great example, and I really appreciate y'all mentioning that, because that is something that we need to continue to develop in addition to these partnerships with the businesses. So thank you so much for being willing to share and being open to participate in our first ever stakeholder integration conference. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And I just want to say we couldn't do it without the consortium. We have an awesome consortium here in San Antonio at Region 20. They have given us a lot of support. And again, Michelle, excuse me, we both over here coughing, but excuse me, Michelle has been a great person to she stay on contact with me, as she said before, and I really appreciate that, because if it wasn't for her and the consortium, who she works for, we couldn't do this without them.
Thank you. We love it, so it makes it easier. We love each other, so it makes it easier.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. And be sure you get the contact information for Michelle, Shelley, and Daphne. It's on the screen, and it will be available in the recording. So thank you all so much. And if there's no other questions, then I'll go ahead and say thank you, and I'm going to end this session, and I'm going to move to the next one. So thank y'all so much
Thanks,
for
everybody.
sharing.